Lion in the Wind, Epilogue. 2 months later. Delgra sat back in his chair and happily read the headline sprawled boldly across the top of the newspaper. He grinned. Looks like Black's getting the gallows next Monday. I think it's a fitting end to an evil man, he said. Odivian nodded. That nod on his head Brakeman gave him was probably a pretty good reminder that no evil goes unpunished, he said with a grin. Agreed. And speaking of Brakeman, how's he doing? Odivian frowned. Not so good. The death of his parents hit him pretty hard. He was even more shook up when he heard about Chigani. Delgra sighed. Those lions were some of the bravest souls I've ever met. It's too bad all their schematics and spare parts were destroyed during the fighting. I would have loved to have seen Chigani repaired and revived again so I could thank him for what he did. He shook his head in amazement and chuckled. It still astounds me that a machine like him could become so Yigzin, and in the end, selflessly give his life to save someone like us. So what are they going to do with the lions in the meantime? They obviously can't be repaired. Well, at least not right away, said Odivian. The General Secretary has ordered that they be kept safely locked away until someone can either repair their existing bodies, or build them new ones. The problem is, Bergen's designs were so advanced and revolutionary that it'll likely be several generations before someone figures out how to do that. It'll certainly never happen in my lifetime. Odivian shrugged. It may be sooner than you think. Delgra snorted. Not likely. Odivian grinned. You never know. Oh, and by the way, I heard that the Secretary of Defense has offered you a job commanding 2nd Battalion, 3rd ID. You going to take him up on it? Delgra leaned back and put his hands behind his head. Nah, I think I'm going to stay here. Odivian looked at him curiously. Why? Isn't this what you wanted? The command of your own combat unit? Yes, at one point I did. But not anymore. I feel like I need to dedicate the rest of my time in the military to helping the government revive the lions. I'll be more useful in that effort if I stay here. Odivian grinned. I never thought you'd be one to stick to a desk job. Delgra shrugged. After nearly 6 years of being here, I've really come to like it. Odivian laughed. Don't go and get too comfortable or you'll have to start buying bigger uniforms. Delgra looked at him curiously. What for? To make room for that gut of yours, he said chidingly. My, what? I am not getting fat, Sergeant, he protested jokingly. Well, you will if you keep hanging out behind that desk all day like you do. Well, fine then. Just for that I'm going to outrun you every morning during PT. How's that? Think you can keep up with this old man? Odivian laughed heartily. Bring it on. I welcome the challenge. Brakeman sat somberly on a hillside outside of the Echo Military Science Labs and stared blankly off into the distance as he played scenes of his family over and over again in his mind. Even 2 months later the bitter sting of loss had not faded away. He repeatedly went over everything that had happened, and considered what he might have done differently to save them. If he had, Chigani would still be alive. But instead, his parents were dead, and the lions were relegated to a dusty old storeroom in a government warehouse where they would likely lie forgotten and abandoned forever. As he sat there, Wick walked up beside him and sat down. Hello, Brakeman, he said kindly. But Brakeman ignored him. I know you miss your family dearly. I miss them as well. I still feel responsible for what happened to them that day, said Oik. Brakeman continued to ignore him. Oik reached into his backpack and pulled out a small package and placed it on his lap. Your father was a great man. His genius impressed me every time I saw it. During the time he stayed with me in the mountains, he became restless, and did whatever he could to while away the time. His efforts produced this. He took the package and laid it on Brakeman's lap. Brakeman looked down and studied it. What is it? He asked. Open it, smiled Oik. Brakeman looked curiously at the small package and then carefully opened it. Inside were several large journals filled to the brim with notes and drawings. As Brakeman read each page, a picture began to form in his mind. His eyes grew slowly wider. He soon looked at Oik in amazement. "Is this," he said, half knowing the answer. Oik nodded. He knew that Chigani and the other lions were in grave danger, and would likely be in need of repairs when everything was done. But instead of trying to fix their old bodies, he set about designing new ones. These are his plans. With them, you can restore your brothers and sisters to life. Brakeman's expression slowly changed from amazement to one of heartfelt joy. He clasped the journals to his chest, and said happily, "Thank you. Thank you. You don't know what this means to me." Oik smiled and nodded. "I think I do." Brakeman quickly bundled up the journals and leapt to his feet. He ran a few steps, stopped and turned back to Oik with a smile. He then hurried off again across the prairie to find Major Delgra and Dr. Visnell in order to share with them this treasure on paper. As he ran, he leapt for joy, and cried, "Chigani's gonna live. He's gonna live." But as he did, Nagago glared at him with disdain from the shadows of a nearby grove of trees. "You've won this time, Mashwa. But ultimately I will have the victory, and your throne. When this is over, you will bow to me," he hissed. The end.